You got a preference on, well, this guy's been waiting forever.
No, they're the one that's been on the phone the longest.
Yeah. Jason.
I almost want to start by apologizing.
Yeah, that's true. In fairness, we gave one person 40 minutes, and we don't have the time to give Jason 40. But Jason, in Tennessee, you are... Oh, sorry, you aren't on the line. Let's try that one more time. Wow. Can you try hitting talk? I just get the circle, and then it goes away. Would you mind trying to pick that up?
Let me see what I can do.
Yeah.
Yep. I hit it. There we go. Jason's online.
Excellent.
Thanks for waiting.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Sure do.
Thank you.
We can.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, let me go ahead and get to my question. I won't be long-winded just because I know you guys are pressed for time. I'm going to do more of a question rather than an argument today, and I'll come back another time for an argument. I know you guys... Okay, well, I can't say I know. Matt, you stated earlier, like, if theists will ask you your position, just to clarify instead of state your position. Is it fair to say or to ask that both of you would say, as agnostic atheists, you lack a belief in God?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Jimmy, does that apply to you too? Sorry.
Yeah, I was the one who said sure, but yes.
Okay. Now, my question when I called in, and I was trying to explain to the call screener, was if you said something like on a scale of 1 to 100, 100 being convinced there is no God, I understand that there's no Cartesian certainty or understanding of knowledge here, okay? I'm not going to claim that you guys have knowledge one way or the other. But if you said your confidence level that there probably isn't a God, if one being that you're not certain at all, and 100 being you're almost, well, you are completely certain, where would your confidence level lie that there's likely not to be a God?
I think you'll find the question incredibly uninteresting unless you give me a specific God you want to react to. Putting a number to it is also a bit silly, so I'd probably try to use words to describe it. As, there are some days that extremely confident might feel like 85% to me, and some days that I would say anything over 30% is an excess of confidence. So all of that can be subjective to how one feels on a given day. But if you're just asking broadly about a God, I am 0% certain that there is no God or anything I would recognize as a God anywhere. But that does not mean that I am also 0% certain that there is a God somewhere. It matches my certainty and my uncertainty. Regarding specific gods, that confidence goes up. I feel that there is an adequate burden of proof that anything you would call the biblical God doesn't exist. Okay.
And for the purposes of my call, since, again, I know we're limited on time and I'm going to be succinct here, it's going to be, a deistic framework. I was going to go with, you kind of hit on it a little bit with Amir earlier, talking about the origin of space and time, or linear time, the Big Bang Theory, or the cosmological argument, talking about a creator God, let's say a personal agency that created the universe, just a deistic framework, not a religion. Yeah, you're saying you're not really sure where you fall on that confidence level?
No, I said the opposite. I said 0% certain, which is the same as or 0% certain it doesn't exist, which matches identically to my 0% certainty that it does exist.
So here's the flaw in the question. Sorry, Jason.
Okay.
We, all three of us, agree that there exists a universe that we share. Right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, cool. There needs to be some sort of explanation for why there is the universe that we experience. When we try to determine what that is, we need to begin by making a list of candidate explanations. What sort of thing could explain why there's a universe? I'm not convinced that the God proposition has even been demonstrated to be a candidate explanation, as in a possible. I don't know that it's possible. And so if the case is, pick the most probable, if you're going to make an abductive argument for it's most reasonable to conclude, given that we don't know, what the actual answer is, that it's more probable than not that there's some sort of intelligent, creative being behind it all. That's not true. What's happening there is the correct answer is we don't know what the candidate explanations are, but people have made up possible explanations. Multiverse, God. Cool. Let's just say that right now, those are the only two that we have. Some version of a multiverse or some version of God. At least with a multiverse, there is no additional assertion that the multiverse is a thinking agent that intentionally made this particular universe. It is naturalistic processes that, even though they extend beyond the nature of the universe we experience, don't add the unnecessary, oh, it's a thinking agent, oh, it has these desires. So just putting those two up front, not knowing whether or not either of them is truly a candidate, I don't know whether the multiverse is truly a candidate or God is truly a candidate. I would say the multiverse wins on probability just because it doesn't violate Occam's razor. The God multiplies entities unnecessarily. But because I don't know if either of them are candidates, then instead of saying, what is your confidence that there is no God? I mean, that's like saying, if we find a dead body, what is your confidence level that it's not my brother who killed them? Without any way to investigate, without any evidence, how confident are you that my brother didn't kill that body? That's the question you're basically asking me. And it's absurd. I can't possibly answer that because I don't have enough information to conclude it didn't. I don't have enough information to conclude it did. I don't even know if it's reasonable to conclude that my brother is a candidate for the dead body. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Yes, Matt, completely. I think another way to phrase the question so it doesn't sound as absurd, because I play it in my mind a lot easier than when it comes out into words. It's going to be a barometer of somebody's feelings on the matter. I understand, and I think this is the part I have trouble wrapping my head around as a theist, but also somebody talking from a scientific perspective, and I'm not a scientist. Is going to say, if I talk about the Big Bang Theory and try to weigh the probability of whether it's a personal or non-personal agency involved in the creation of the universe, I don't even know how to begin to assign a probability. I can only come up with what I believe to be a rational explanation, but I don't have probabilities. And I think for philosophical arguments, I think we all struggle to come up with precise probabilities. It might be up beyond the scope of our understanding or intellect.
It's like just now,
but yes,
just
Matt,
now when you mentioned, when you mentioned you don't even know how to begin to weigh the probability. I don't either. And we use the word probability in two different ways. Like, first of all, we need to figure out whether or not something's possible. But probability normatively involves either a calculation or an approximation. When we say, what's the probability of rolling a die on a six-sided die, or rolling a 1 on a six-sided die on a normal one, it's 1 in 6. If we say, which is more probable, rolling a 4 on a six-sided die or rolling a 5 on a 100-sided die? Well, not knowing anything at all about, what other numbers might be on there, if we just go with the normative one, we can calculate, or even if we don't want to do the math, we can approximate the probability. I don't even know how to begin to approximate the probability. But what I can say is that for the example that I gave of multiverse versus God, the multiverse doesn't add things that are necessarily, like, it doesn't require that there's a magical being who exists outside of space-time forever who then can do stuff. But when we're making the list of candidate explanations, I'm kind of stuck. And so instead of saying, how confident are you that God doesn't exist? It should be, every single time anyone who's saying they have good reason to believe that some God exists, they have a burden of proof. And it's not up to anybody else to disprove them, although that's what we end up spending a great deal of our time doing, is, it's like when we talked to Amir earlier, and Amir went from, because he thinks a God's probable, that leads him to conclude that because he thinks that God's probable and that we don't have scientific explanation for him, he has to explain that. And so his first answer is, God can't give scientific evidence. And then when he finds out that leads to a problem, he goes back and revises it, and he says, God can present scientific evidence. He just hasn't or doesn't. And so then the next question becomes, why not? And now that's how you get to, the deistic type gods. Because he's a non-interventionist God. Yes. But if he's not intervening, you're basically claiming to detect the undetectable. And yet Amir, who wants to stick with the deist God, I shouldn't be beating up on him. He's not here. I should be talking to Jason, but he wants to stick with the deist God because it doesn't come with the baggage that a theistic God does. And yet he also wants that God to be loving.
Right. Becomes theistic.
And you can have no more reason for that than the other. So leaning towards a deistic position is, to me, one of the most unreasonable things that one can do.
Yeah.
Because the deistic God, by definition, isn't detectable by us. And so anyone who claims there's a deistic God is essentially asserting that they have either detected the undetectable or that they have reasoned a way to detect without manifestation the undetectable. And I don't know how you do that either.
I will say I agree about it is extremely unreasonable, and it's something you usually realize later, and a lot of ex-religious people do it even though they're trying to be more reasonable. In other words, I'm just saying it is extremely unreasonable. However, I also empathize with the fact that people do it because it's clearly like for a lot of people, a last-ditch effort to hold on to a type of magic that you literally believed in. And in some ways also to not take on a label that, if you take on the label atheist, suddenly your family and people around you treat you differently. And so I can understand almost in apathy with people who go, well, I believe in something because they want to satiate those people around them. However, I don't excuse it. I just understand it. I did think, Jason, while you were talking, that I might have an answer to a question you didn't ask. Sorry, did you have something?
Well,
I was just going to ask real quick, or
yeah, I want Jason to get it.
Sorry, I think there's a little bit.
No,
of
you're fine.
Delay.
Yeah, you're fine. Go ahead.
I think I just wanted for clarification purpose. Jimmy and Matt, you both used the word magic, and I want to be charitable in the use of the word. Is it substitutionary for things we can't explain, or how would you explain or define magic?
I would define it as specifically the ability to violate the physical laws of reality.
Yeah, I'd easily use it interchangeably with supernatural.
Yeah, and again, I almost hate the word supernatural just because I think that there's a realm of understanding even within what you call the confines of physics or laws that I think we still don't have perfect understanding anyway. So I'm when people say magic or supernatural, I still don't know exactly what that means. Is one person's understanding different than another's? Absolutely. I get the gist of what you're saying, though. I'm not trying to be uncharitable. I guess I want to be quick here because, again, I could go down a rabbit hole and have 50 different arguments by the time we're done.
Well, if you want to be quick, actually, let me do two things with you then. You called in with a question that I assume, come on, I get time. Jay, you called in with a question. I assume you've answered it for yourself, right?
Well, if I can just put it really quickly another way, so it doesn't sound.
I just want to know. I want to know what number you had given it beforehand. What probability you had given?
Given to you guys or for myself?
When you asked yourself the question you asked us, what probability do you put on it? What number did you come up with?
Well,
maybe I'm misunderstanding you, Jimmy. I'm having trouble understanding the way you're putting the question back.
You called us and you said, what probability on your do you put on your confidence that there is no God? And so what probability have you put on your confidence that there is a God?
I can't weight a probability. However, I would say for myself, my confidence and level in a deistic framework or a God is definitely, I'm leaning that direction. I would say, if I had to throw out a number, I would say probably about 90% to 95% confident. I have a belief system, but I don't have any Cartesian certainty or knowledge.
And I believe, and my guess is that your justification for that 95 is the stuff you were saying you were wanting to do a different day. Or do you want to share that here?
Well, a lot of it just because I'm going to be going way past probably your guys' time limit, and the argument's going to go into something else. I would say, again, I start with, as a theist, I start as a stepping stone looking at the Kalam cosmological, or I look at the Big Bang Theory. I try to come up with not come up with, it sounds like I have an intent, but I look at it like, okay, is there a rationale behind whether or not there's a personal agency? And once I establish that argument and say whether it's valid or logical, the next stepping stone is going, are we familiar with who that agency would or would not be? And that's a whole nother argument for another day. But my, I guess to be quick and to the point, again, I keep saying that, but I really know you guys are pressed for time. My logic would be to say that if in the scientific realm, which I'm not a scientist, in the scientific realm, if the Big Bang Theory is right now currently held as the most provisionally sound and secure model that they are now positing. Now there's other theories, I understand that, but if that is true, then we have to go back to the point of singularity and go whether or not, when this point of singularity came into motion, right, it expanded, whether or not there was a personal or non-personal agency behind it. I can't weight a probability behind it, but I could say that I could come up with a perfectly sound justification for why I believe that a personal agency was used into bringing that into being.
But you're saying you don't want to do that today, or you're now wanting to do that?
Well, I'm saying I think it's a rational belief to hold, to say that it's probable or likely that a personal being made a conscious decision to set the Big Bang into motion, because otherwise, and forgive me if my scientific background is not perfectly sound here, that when we say prior to, there's no timeline, but, in the logical sense of prior to, the point of singularity could have been an infinite state of matter or energy. And I've heard other people that are scientifically qualified say something to that degree. If it was in an infinite state prior to that happening, okay, you'd have to come up with, not that we have to produce something right now, we could wait on the more scientific evidence to come in, but if we want to have a discussion about it, I do think it's rational to say that there's a likelihood to the idea. But again, I can't weight a probability. So I can't come to you and act like I have
and yet you got to 95%.
Philosophical argument.
Yeah, that's literally what I was going to say. Is you've put a number on your own confidence, then you also,
well, not just on that piece,
and you also in your explanation switched rational, possible, and probable for each other. I'm assuming you only meant one of the three, but you used them all three the same way. Then you said you can't weigh a probability. You've already established you haven't. We've already discussed that you haven't established a possibility, let alone before probability, and yet your confidence is so anchored so incredibly high. I don't know. That's a very strange series of events to me.
No, Jimmy, I'm sorry if I misspoke, but I'm not saying my 95% level of confidence, if I just arbitrarily weight a number here on a scale, I'm not saying it solely exists on this philosophical reasoning or argument alone. I'm saying in this particular case, whether the universe came into existence through a personal or non-personal agency, I can't give you a probability,
or possibility.
I mean, not in a sincere level. But I'm saying that there's
and yet you've reached the conclusion. And when you started to talk about why, you said, well, because of the Kalam, what's the collusion of the Kalam?
Well, to my understanding, I don't have it pulled up right now, but that there is a personal God and it is linked to the Christian God?
No. That is not the Kalam cosmological argument. Is everything that begins to exist has a cause for its existence. The universe has a cause for its existence. Therefore, or the universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause for its existence. That's the entirety. It does not conclude anything about a personal creator. So that's not a reason to conclude a personal creator. Then you said the other thing other than the Kalam was Big Bang Theory, but the Big Bang Theory doesn't have anything at all about a thinking agent or personal creator. Then you went back to the singularity, and you just said that you could come up with a perfectly sound justification for why it is reasonable to conclude that this is the result of a decision by a thinking agent. I would love for if it's perfectly sound, then I will accept it, as will anybody. And so I don't think you're using sound in the way that the rest of us would use sound. And when you say that you can't calculate or tell the probability or likelihood of this, yet you have an extremely high confidence that there was a thinking agent. So can you we only have one universe. So I don't know what other universe you've been able to explore to try to figure out what the potential causes of it. You would need to demonstrate that there can be a thinking agent absent a material brain, and show an example of when a thinking agent has ever done anything remotely like creating a universe.
Jason, yeah.
Is that a segue for a question? I was just waiting on you.
I'm saying those are the two things that you'd need to do. Like you say you can give a perfectly sound justification, but whatever justification you give must account for a thinking agent that is not derived from a material brain, and that you have some example of any thinking agent doing something remotely like instantiating a universe. I don't think you have examples for either one of those. Do you?
No, of course, I have no example, being this is the only universe that we're familiar with. I have no, when I use the word sound argument, I didn't mean that I had concrete evidence or proof. The way I meant it semantically was saying this is a viable option within our understanding.
But it's not
of
a
what
viable
the
option.
could be.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, even under that definition, to say that something is a viable option, what you're saying is that it's reasonable to conclude that a thinking agent is responsible for the origin of the universe. And in order for that to be reasonable to conclude, you'd have to show that a thinking agent can exist outside of the universe, and that a thinking agent can, in fact, create a universe. You have nothing to demonstrate that either of those are possible. So how can that be a viable candidate explanation?
Well, again, I don't have a demonstration of physical evidence here. Of course, we all can agree on that.
I'm
saying that I think there's a philosophical argument.
I know. So look, when I said we found a dead body, and we suggested that perhaps my brother killed him, if we have no evidence that my brother exists and no evidence that my brother had means, motive, or opportunity, then is my brother even a viable candidate for the position of the murderer?
I again, just giving you a little hint of my background as somebody what I do professionally. I've worked in a special investigation unit for insurance.
Does
we do origin and cause, so this is related.
Is anything about what you do professionally an answer to my question? Or, look, if we're making a list of potential candidates for who murdered this body that we just found, does my brother go on the list if there's no evidence that my brother exists and no evidence that my brother had means, motive, or opportunity? Do we get to consider him a viable candidate as the murderer?
Could we consider them as somebody that we want to interview and consider? Yes, but we can't come to a conclusion.
Of you trying to rehabilitate this in order to avoid answering the question.
No, I'm trying to answer it. I understand the question.
No,
sorry.
it's really easy. If you no, you didn't. If you have no, if we found a body, Jason, you and I found a body right here in Austin, Texas. It's on my front yard. Somebody says we should consider my brother as a candidate in this murder, and they have no evidence that I even have a brother, and no evidence that he has means, motive, or opportunity to do it. Do we get to consider my brother a candidate for the position of murderer?
In the way you elaborated, no.
Okay, if we find a universe on my front yard and somebody says God created it, and we don't have any way to confirm that God exists or that God has means, motive, or opportunity to do so, does God get to be a candidate for that universe we just found in my front yard? The fact that there's no answer is absolutely mind-numbing. I don't get it.
Trick. It's not a trick. It just undermines your foundation.
Facts of reasonable epistemology. No, you don't get to consider God a candidate until you demonstrate why God should be considered a candidate, which would require that God is capable of doing something like this and that he exists. As soon as you demonstrate that my brother exists and that he had means, motive, and opportunity, he gets to be a candidate for that murder, and not 1 second before. You want God to be a candidate for something when you can't demonstrate that God could be a candidate, and you want to claim it's perfectly sound or eminently reasonable or whatever language you want to use. But the fact of the matter is, it's not. Something doesn't become a candidate explanation until you show that it can possibly be a candidate explanation. And this is the mistake that the Kalam makes when they try to extend it beyond, therefore, the universe had a cause, to, therefore, that cause is God. You got to show it.
Jason,
I'm sorry that the example, but anyway, go ahead.
What time zone are you in, Jason?
I am in Central Time Zone. It's
cool.
5 o'clock.
2 o'clock next Sunday, 2 o'clock the Sunday after, 2 o'clock the Sunday after that. The earlier you call, the better. If you want to watch the call, adjust some of your arguments, adjust some of your positions. Again, Matt will be off next week if it's Matt specifically you're wanting to reevaluate some stuff with. Otherwise, I'll be here with Derek from Myth Vision. But 2 o'clock Central Time, and like I said, next week, and probably every week after, even on holidays. Give us a call, all right?
Hey, Jimmy, can I ask one quick last thing? It's not related to the argument.
Go for it.
Okay, last time I called in, I spoke with Matt and Dave Warnick, I believe is his name.
Yeah, great guy.
Is Dave doing okay? I'm just sincerely asking.
Buddy, every week on Tuesdays at 6 p.m., you can watch, and if you wanted, you could call Dave Warnock at 6 p.m. because he is on this very channel on a show called Dying Out Loud. Let me answer your question, I guess, sort of directly, but also what you're really at. No, of course he's not doing okay. He has ALS, and it is going to kill him. But it probably won't kill him this week, and he will probably still be well enough to do a show this week, for example, this Tuesday with Footless Joe. So that's the best answer I have for you, but you can come and in fact, another thing you can do if you like Dave and you want to support him and the conversations and everything, on Tuesday you could send a super chat for $5 or more, and he'll read it at the end, and he could say, "Hey Dave, we talked a while back. I just wanted to know how you're doing." If you didn't want to call in, if you just wanted to ask him, and he'll read it out and he'll answer in his own words too. I'm using you a bit as a prop here, Jason, to promote shows and tell people things they can do, but very much if you would like to as well. You could do that on Tuesday.
Okay, well, thank you for all that, Jimmy, and thank you guys for your time.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks.
Or sorry, thanks, Jason.
All right, thank you.
That is not the first time I've made that mistake, calling a Jason a Dave or a Dave a Jason, because on top of the caller Jason and a co-host named Dave Warnock, I have a brother named David and a brother named Jason, and that very mix-up has probably happened hundreds of times in my life, that very specific one.
Hello, I'm Jimmy Snow, executive producer of The Line, and I only became a woodworker for the puns. That's not important. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so on our Patreon or as a channel member, and you can actually support specific shows and specific hosts in special tiers on those. Check those options out. Also, you can leave a super thanks and get a little highlighted deal. But if all else fails, you can always you can subscribe and leave a comment. Now, here are some suggestions because I don't care about the algorithm. I am the algorithm. Bye.